Welcome to Real Vetted, your guide to a smarter, simpler home buying experience. In this video, we're going to walk you through the key forms included in the Buyer Representation and Broker Compensation Agreement, or BRBC packet. These forms are designed to clarify your rights, responsibilities, and relationship with your real estate broker. And we'll go through each one in the legal order they're presented. 1. Disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship, Form AD. First, we start with one of the most important disclosures in real estate, who your agent represents. This form explains 3 types of agency relationships. A seller's agent, who works only for the seller. A buyer's agent, who works only for you. Or a dual agent, where one brokerage represents both sides in the same transaction, which is legal, but only with everyone's written consent. Each agent has a fiduciary duty to act with honesty, integrity, and loyalty. But they must also disclose material facts about a property, while keeping confidential information, like your negotiation strategy, private. This form makes sure everyone is on the same page from the very beginning, just the way it should be. All right, now let's take a closer look at the heart of the packet. The Buyer Representation and Broker Compensation Agreement, or BRBC as it's known in the biz. This agreement covers everything about how your broker will represent you and how they'll get paid. It's made up of 15 key sections, so let's break them down step by step. Section 1. Right to represent. This is where you, the buyer, give the broker permission to represent you in your search for a home or property. It also defines what you're trying to buy, whether that's a house, a condo, a manufactured home, or even vacant land. Think of this as the official start of your working relationship. Section 2. Terms of representation. This section outlines the fine print of your agreement. Let's walk through the key parts. Section A is about representation. A. 1. Representation period. This is how long the agreement lasts. It can be for any period of time, but only up to 3 months total. A. 2. Type of representation. This section identifies whether this is a non-exclusive or exclusive relationship. Non-exclusive means you can work with other brokers too. Exclusive means this broker gets paid even if someone else helps you buy a property. B. Property type. This section describes what types of properties you're looking for. Residential, multi-unit, commercial, etc. B2 covers locations such as cities or counties you're searching in, and B3 is a blank space for you to describe any additional home requirements. C. Buyer preferences and priorities. This refers to a separate form where you can list specific needs, like number of bedrooms. Commute time, for instance. D. Properties excluded from representation. If you've already seen a property with another broker, you can exclude it here, so you don't accidentally owe 2 brokers a commission. Broker compensation. E. 1. This indicates how the broker gets paid. It could be a percentage of the sale price or a flat fee. E. 2. If a seller or someone else pays the broker, that amount gets subtracted from what you owe. E. 3. If you buy a home the broker helped you find, even after the agreement ends, they may still earn their fee. That's called a continuation period. F. Cancellation rights. This explains how either party can cancel the agreement. Non-exclusive agreements can be canceled immediately. Exclusive ones require written notice, and the cancellation takes effect after 30 days or however many days are written in the blank space. G. Buyer financial/personal information. G1. You agree to share personal financial information within a few days, like a pre-approval letter or proof of funds. G2. If you can't afford to pay your broker, they don't have to represent you unless the seller agrees to cover the fee. H. Other terms. A catch-all for any custom agreements, like payment schedules or other deal-specific terms. Section 3. Advisories, addenda, and disclosures. This confirms that all relevant documents, like the Broker Compensation Advisory, are attached and reviewed. These are the documents we're covering in the rest of this video. Section 4. Compensation to broker. This section goes deep into how and when your broker is paid. If you buy a property during the agreement, or anytime within the continuation period, your broker is entitled to their fee. If you break a deal without good cause, you might still owe the broker. And if the seller refuses to pay as agreed, the broker can pursue compensation directly, either through escrow or legal channels. Section 5. Cancellation of Buyer Representation Agreement. This just reinforces what we saw earlier. You can cancel with written notice. Your broker can still get paid for properties they helped with during the representation or continuation period. Section 6. Agency relationships. This confirms you received the disclosure regarding agency and that you understand your broker might also represent the seller. In that case, they become a dual agent, which requires full disclosure and consent from everyone involved. Section 7. Properties excluded from representation. If you've already worked with another broker on certain properties, this section protects you from paying two commissions. You'll list those properties here to avoid any conflicts. Section 8. Broker authorizations and obligations. Here's what your broker agrees to do: help you find homes, submit offers, and negotiate terms. Coordinate inspections, appraisals, and meetings. Provide referrals for professionals like inspectors or lenders. Section 9. Buyer obligations. Now, here's what you agree to. Act in good faith. Share your financial information. Cover the cost of inspections. Tell your broker what matters to you in the home buying process. You're also agreeing to read all documents carefully and hire professionals as needed. This is all about protecting your own interests. Section 10. Attorney fees. If there's ever a dispute between you and your broker, both sides agree to pay their own legal fees, unless a different clause overrides this later. Section 11. Management approval. If the person signing the agreement is a broker associate or salesperson, their managing broker has the right to cancel the agreement within 5 days. Section 12. Dispute resolution. You agree to try mediation first, if there's ever a conflict. If that fails, you can go to court, unless you've signed a separate arbitration agreement. Section 13. Legally authorized signer. If you're signing on behalf of a trust, company, or estate, you'll need to prove you have the legal authority to act for that entity. Section 14. Entire agreement. This confirms that everything you've agreed to is in writing, with no hidden terms and no verbal promises. Any changes must also be made in writing and signed by both parties. Section 15. Exclusive representation. If you and your broker checked the exclusive box earlier and initialed this section, you're agreeing not to work with other brokers during the agreement. The broker is entitled to their fee no matter how the deal gets done, even if you find the property yourself. You can still cancel, but the broker gets to send you a list of properties they helped with. If you buy one of those homes later, they still get paid. That was a lot. But it's important that you have a clear understanding of the buyer representation and broker compensation agreement from start to finish. Remember, you can always reach out to us with questions concerning the BRBC or any buyer-related topics. Now, back to some disclosures. Let's go over the Buyer's Investigation Advisory next. This disclosure reminds you that before you commit to buying a home, you'll want to know everything about it. That's exactly what this advisory is about. It urges you to thoroughly investigate the property before you close escrow. That includes the structure, the roof, the plumbing, and all the major systems, like the HVAC, for instance. Also, environmental concerns like mold or lead, fire, flood, and earthquake risks. Understanding the zoning is important, and of course permits, neighborhood conditions, and anything else that could affect the home or its occupants. Your agent can help guide you, but in the end, it's up to you to hire inspectors, ask questions, and make sure the home fits your needs. Let's go over the Broker Compensation Advisory in full. This form is designed to give buyers and sellers a clear understanding of how real estate brokers are paid. Section 1. When sellers list their property for sale through a real estate broker. Subsection A. Listing agreement compensation is fully negotiable. When a seller hires a broker to list their home, the seller agrees to pay that broker if the property sells. But the amount of that payment, called compensation, is not fixed by law. It's fully negotiable. The broker and seller decide together what's fair, based on factors like the broker's experience, the scope of services provided, and the time and expenses involved in selling the home. Subsection B. Optional additional compensation if buyer is unrepresented. Sometimes a buyer doesn't have their own agent. When that happens, the seller's broker might still help move the deal forward, even though they don't represent the buyer. That creates more work for the listing broker. If the seller agrees, they can include additional compensation in the listing agreement to cover that extra effort. Subsection C. Broker may represent both buyer and seller. Dual agency. California law allows one brokerage to represent both the seller and the buyer in a transaction. That's called dual agency. This often happens when different agents within the same firm are working with both parties. If dual agency occurs, the law requires that everyone involved is told and agrees in writing. Brokers can be paid by both the buyer and seller in these situations as long as it's disclosed and agreed upon. Section 2. Broker agreements with buyers. Subsection A. Buyer representation. Compensation is fully negotiable. Just like listing agreements, compensation for representing a buyer is also fully negotiable. When a buyer hires a broker to help find and purchase a home, the two parties agree on what that service is worth. They can base it on factors like the broker's expertise, the level of support provided, and the time invested in the process. Subsection B. Requirement for written agreements. Because of a nationwide legal settlement, brokers who use a multiple listing service, also known as an MLS, are required to have a written agreement in place before showing buyers a home. That agreement must clearly state what the buyer will pay the broker and must limit compensation to that amount. Subsection C. Advantages of written agreements. There are clear benefits to putting everything in writing. A signed agreement creates shared expectations between the buyer and their broker, helps avoid confusion, and ensures that everyone understands their roles, responsibilities, and compensation. Section 3. When enlisting a broker, buyers agree to pay, but who pays can be negotiated. Subsection A. Buyer pays the compensation. Pursuant to a buyer representation agreement. If you're a buyer and you've signed a representation agreement like the BRBC, you're contractually agreeing to pay your broker. That payment usually happens through escrow at the close of the transaction. Subsection B. Seller pays the compensation. B1. Buyer negotiates for seller to compensate buyer's broker. You, as the buyer, can ask the seller to pay your broker. This is done by including a request in your offer. That request becomes part of the overall negotiation. The seller can accept it, reject it, or counter it. Whether or not the seller agrees, your obligation to pay your broker still exists unless otherwise negotiated. B2. Buyer's agent negotiates an agreement directly with seller. If the seller isn't working with their own broker, your agent may negotiate a separate agreement directly with the seller to cover their compensation. That doesn't make your agent the seller's agent. Subsection C. Changing practice, related to a seller's broker's offer of compensation. In the past, sellers' brokers often offered compensation to buyers' agents through the MLS. That practice has ended. The new rules and changes to California Association of Realtors forms now require buyers and sellers to handle broker compensation through direct agreements. That means buyers need to negotiate how their agent is paid, and those terms should be clearly spelled out in writing. So, in short, the broker compensation advisory makes sure everyone, both buyers and sellers, understands who's paying whom, how much, and why. The goal is transparency, fairness, and full compliance with California law and national regulations. Now let's go over the disclosure called Possible Representation of More Than One Buyer or Seller, also known as Form PRBS. It simply lets you know that your broker may be representing multiple clients at the same time, including people who are buying or selling properties that you might also be interested in. For example, if you're looking to buy a home in a certain neighborhood, it's possible that your broker is also working with another buyer who's looking in the exact same area. In some cases, both of you might even want to make offers on the same house. This form makes sure you're aware of that possibility. It also explains that your broker may represent both the buyer and the seller in a single transaction. That's what's known as dual agency. Now, dual agency is legal in California, but only if both parties are fully informed and give written consent. It's all about transparency. When dual agency happens, the broker is legally required to treat both sides fairly. They can't favor one client over the other, and they can't disclose confidential information, like how much you're willing to offer, unless you give permission in writing. This form doesn't change anything about your rights or your agreement with your broker. It's simply a heads up that real estate brokers often have multiple clients, and they have to manage those relationships carefully. By signing this form, you're acknowledging that you understand these possibilities and that you agree to continue working with your broker under those conditions. It's one more way to make sure there's no confusion down the road. We're almost finished. Thanks for hanging in there. These disclosures and advisories are important to understand. Now let's go over the California Consumer Privacy Act Advisory, also known as the CCPA. Here we talk about your personal information and how it's handled during the real estate process. When you're buying a home, you end up sharing a lot of personal data. That can include your contact details, financial documents, pre-approval letters, and even photos or video if you're doing virtual tours. And understandably, you might wonder who sees that information and what happens to it. That's where the California Consumer Privacy Act comes in. This law gives you rights and control over your personal data, and the CCPA advisory is here to explain what that means for you. First, you have the right to know what personal information is being collected about you. You can ask who it's being shared with and for what purpose. That means you're not left in the dark about how your data is being used. You also have the right to request that your information be corrected if something's wrong, or even deleted in certain situations. And if your data is being shared or sold, which typically isn't the case in a real estate transaction, but could happen through third-party service providers, you have the right to opt out. This advisory isn't a contract. It doesn't ask you to agree to anything. It's simply a notice that your rights are protected under California law and that your broker and brokerage are committed to handling your information responsibly. At the end of the day, real estate is about trust, and that includes knowing your personal data is treated with care. The CCPA advisory helps ensure that transparency is part of the process from the very beginning. And that wraps it up. Your full walkthrough of the BRBC packet and every disclosure that comes with it. At Real Vetted, we believe transparency builds trust, and making sure you understand the BRBC, the disclosures, and advisories is the first step to a smooth and confident home buying experience. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, we're here to help, so please feel free to reach out anytime.